Brother's question is, what rights do the people who are witness, family, what rights do they have when the police raid takes place? Well, essentially they have the rights that anybody else does, but how are they going to enforce those? As I said at the beginning, the police often, invariably their way of dealing with these cases is to be very heavy-handed. They'll always say, let's take any ordinary criminal case, because if you were going to raid somebody you suspect of dealing drugs, and he has a reputation for carrying firearms, police officers, I'm not going to walk into that. I'm not trying to defend the police's actions, but we also have to appreciate that there are policies, and that if you were a police officer, how would you expect to do that job? If you're going to raid somebody's house where there are guns potentially and other illegal weapons, then you're going to go in mob-handed and you want to contain the scene. That's the phrase that they use. Now, and essentially that's what will happen. But counter-terrorism, with terrorism cases, that's exactly what will happen, whether they have a concern or not, because my view is they want to it is a tactic to frighten everybody in the house. And that, as horrible as it sounds, it could be argued it's even a legitimate tactic, because that way everybody's startled. You can do what you need to do, contain the scene, and then bring the level of fear down, as it were. That sounds, I know it sounds a little bizarre, but that is a way of dealing with things. Of course, the police should be sensitive to the people that are in the house. We know that with the Barbara Ahmed case, for example, they weren't particularly sensitive to others, and there were people being dragged up and down the stairs. There was a case in East London where brothers and family were treated very badly. We can make complaint about that, but unfortunately, and I'm a practical lawyer, I won't give you false or advice that I don't think is real. The truth of it is that may happen. It's something that we would have to deal with. I mean, I think that there are wider issues here, and I think that Saghir and Kaleem touched on, which I would endorse as well. The real issue when these things happen, it's about fear and creating fear, and how the Muslim community deal with that. And my real message would be, and this isn't as a lawyer, but is that you have to overcome fear, whether it's on the day of arrest or subsequently. Cage, other groups need to get involved, and you need to contact them so we can start building up our own position. The Muslim community can build its position, and the police will know that if there is going to be a response. And I don't mean a proportionate response that's within the law. That is what we need to do. So, unfortunately, it can happen that sisters or any other members are abused, and I'm not happy about that. But the best thing I would say that you can do is, as Brother Kaleem mentioned, as I mentioned at the beginning, is it's counterintuitive, comply. At that point, if the police are in there, you're invariably talking about 10, 15 men, tooled up, if I can use that phrase. You're not going to do anything. The best thing is to say, okay, I am where I am. We'll try and resolve this at some point, but getting involved with them in an antagonistic way is a big no-no in my view.
Just to add, can I just add something? Can I just add something to that? I think the brother was saying that if the person needed to be arrested were pregnant or a situation like vulnerable in some other way, the police have to act reasonably in the circumstances. What's reasonable in their mind is not necessarily reasonable what we would think, a neighbour would think, or what the person who lives in the house thinks. And I imagine, I'm guessing here, but I imagine 99% of arrests probably happen quite calmly, and there isn't too much of a situation. What there is, and this is why I strongly condemn, and I urge you all to condemn strongly as well, is this push towards what we call militarized policing now, much more hard policing. And we saw that, in America with that Ferguson situation going on, with those riots, killing other black people in those situations. And the way they dress, the way they come in, the way they're briefed, reminded me of Barbara Ahmed's arrest, actually. Barbara Ahmed's arrest. and what happened in Forest Gate 5-10 years ago, when a brother was shot, and the police were there for a whole week, and it looked like, you know, oh yeah, can't be smoke without fire, must be really serious, must be this. In the end, what is it? Dig a mountain? Yeah. Come a mole or something? Yeah. They make such a big deal out of things, and when you see at the bottom there's nothing there, or hardly anything there. That's the kind of policing that we need to condemn very strongly. And we've not had the same situation that we have in America, where the police have become trigger happy. But I'm sorry to say we're not very far off that situation unless we all organize and start raising these protests. As I said earlier when I was speaking, if somebody's broken the law, if somebody needs to be arrested, we recognize that, you know, the law's got to follow its course. But is there a need to break legs? Is there a need to use guns? Is there a need to use tasers? Is that just a way of asserting your hardness, your military sort of kind of combat training, or is it necessary to control the situation? And unfortunately, in my experience, I think in most of those situations, it's not necessary, and therefore the police should be held to account.
Okay. The brother made a specific point about pregnant women in the house, and if a sister's pregnant and these sorts of things are going on. First and most important thing is make it very clear to the police that she is. Tell them at the first possible opportunity. The sister herself should tell them at the first possible opportunity. And don't just tell one officer. If a new officer comes in, let them know as well. Because they will claim, oh, there was a breakdown in communication, we didn't know, we didn't realise. And then that officer might be sent off to, I don't know, search the kitchen, and a different officer comes in. So let all of the officers know as firmly and clearly as possible that, look, they need to be gentle in this situation. And in that's one of the few times when you should be communicating with them. Even if you're not the subject of the raid, i.e., say your husband's been arrested or someone else in the house has been arrested, you are entitled to stay there while they search your house. Whether you can record it or not, I'll leave that for the lawyers, but you definitely are allowed to stay there, remain there, and keep an eye on them and make sure that what they're doing is reasonable. With the MI5, if they come up or counter-terrorism, second question, if they come up and speak to you on the street, they have as much right to ask you a question as anybody else has a right to ask you a question on the street. They have no special powers to oblige you to answer them. They have exactly the same rights of speaking to you as I would if I came and asked you for the time or directions. And you have exactly the same right with them to tell them to bugger off as you would have to tell me to. And so that's how it should be treated. Unless they've come in and you're actually in an interview room and being questioned officially, then they are just another member of the public. They're just another person on the street. And the advice should always be, whenever you're talking to these people, don't say anything without a solicitor there. On the Schedule 7 point, just on the broadness of it, really, I just want to say the numbers vary from year to year on how many people are stopped. And I'm trying to remember the exact... 60, yeah, it's gone up and down between 90 and 60,000 over various years. But we can see that those numbers are huge. Even in recent years where it's dipped off a little bit, it's still 60,000 people a year stopped under Schedule 7. That's a massive number. And we've got to call Schedule 7 what it is. It's a mass surveillance, mass spying operation on the Muslim community. Schedule 7 isn't about randomly spotting a terrorist and accidentally stumbling across a giant plot. It's an opportunity to go through your phones, go through your communications, go through your emails, and get as much information as they can out of as many people as they can. Sadly, there have been cases where people have been stopped 8, 9, 10 times, asked exactly the same set of questions just to disrupt their lives, just to disrupt their travel. And in one of those cases that I know of, the person refused to answer the question, and that's still a crime, unfortunately. You can't, even if it's the 50th time they've stopped you, unfortunately, in that situation, at that time, you need to answer the questions. Obviously, how you answer them is another matter. And then put a complaint in afterwards to the IPCC, which I'm sure my friend here will speak more about.
Yeah, if I could just add in relation to the Schedule 7 point, let me explain to you all what Schedule 7 means. It's Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000, and it's a particularly pernicious piece of legislation. What it means is that the police, immigration or customs can stop you at a port, any port of entry into this country. And I've had clients who've rung me, whether it be at Heathrow or Dover, saying that the police have stopped me. They've allowed them to have the phone call. They don't have a right to have a publicly funded lawyer, actually, but they do allow them to have a phone call. And I spoke with my client and I explained that actually there's not that much that we can actually do. The best thing, again, and when I say comply, I want to make clear, complying means in the most minimal terms. It doesn't mean, if they ask you a question, you give them 3 answers. So under Schedule 7, they can ask you. They don't have to have any reasonable suspicion of you having committed a crime at all. So it is, as Kaleem says, information gathering. They can hold you up to 9 hours to ask the questions. That doesn't normally happen in my experience, 2 or 3 hours, but it is unpleasant if you've just come back from a long trip from abroad to be hauled off and your family, separated from your family, it has to be said. You're the person who's being detained and questioned, invariably at Heathrow or Polar Park police station in my experience, your family are left to fend for themselves if you haven't made arrangements. And those are the things that really are pretty mildly annoying. They can seize your property. Invariably, they'll be interested in your telephone, your laptop, tablet, and interrogate those. They can hold those items for up to 7 days. And again, there is nothing that your lawyers can do about that. So Schedule 7 is particularly pernicious, as I say, but my experience has been that most of the people that I've spoken to, actually all of the ones I've dealt with, have been interviewed and released. It is information gathering. In relation to being approached by MI5 officers or anybody, I mean, I think Brother Kareem put it exactly right. We have to be robust as a community. I think there's a lot of fear out there that something's going to happen to me. I can't say that it isn't, but the fact of it is, whether it is or isn't, you're going to have to step up to the plate, as it were. We're going to have to deal with this as a community. And my advice would be that it's not so much contacting your lawyer, because your lawyer is not going to be able to do that much if an MI5 officer speaks to you. But I do think that contacting CAGE is important. I think reporting and recording of these approaches is key for the community. We're then able to gather the information and able to challenge what they're doing. But if we don't know about it, then we can't do anything about it. So it has to be reported, and CAGE is exactly the right organisation to do that. And I would implore anybody, if you or somebody you know has been approached, speak to CAGE. I mean, it can be done anonymously as well. I mean, you don't have to give all your details. And then it can be recorded. Then we as a community can know what's going on. For me, as a lawyer, I get involved in the cases that I do, and I know other lawyers, and so therefore know more than most people know. But the truth of it is, we don't actually know what's going on. And so as a community, we need to be more informed. And again, I can't say highly enough how CAGE is key for that. That organisation, this organisation, can be built up if we use it and if we support it. The last point about cameras, the truth of it, there's no law on it. If a police officer, I don't think any police officer coming in on a raid is going to be very happy about anybody videoing what they're doing, and they will invariably take the video off them. Using reasonable force, I suspect. There may be an issue about that, because it's a grey area. They could argue that people are interfering with the investigation and the raid, and therefore they shouldn't be doing that. You may remember that recently, the last year or so, there has been a suggestion, and I'm sure no police officer wants it, of body cameras with the vests, and they have a little camera. I mean, if that comes in, of course, I think it would be great, because then they can record exactly, well, if we get to see it, it's another matter, but at least we know it's been recorded, and therefore we would potentially have access to that information. Yeah, well, exactly. I suspect that in terrorism cases, the camera may not be working or malfunctioning or something. But it's something that we then have an opportunity to challenge. And that, as lawyers, that's what we do. We look at the process. I know you, as members of the public, you say, well, we're not really interested in the process. But I think you need to be. Because if you understand how the process works, then you can put yourself in a better position to challenge something. And I think that's the key word for me. Doing the work that I've done, I've been doing this job for 20 years, and what my real advice to people is to actually know what's happening and not be fearful and challenge through the right channels. Yes.
So one very last quick point on Schedule 7. A good friend of mine was stopped under Schedule 7. He lives with some brothers in a house, and they said, what are your housemates' names? And he quite legitimately and correctly said that my housemates are called Muhammad, Muhammad, and Muhammad. And they said, what are their surnames? So I don't really know. One's called Tall Muhammad, the other one's Short Muhammad, and the last one's Fat Muhammad. And so you have to answer questions in Schedule 7. It doesn't mean that your answers need to be useful. Sorry, the brother at the front here was just about to ask a question.
The police are able to take samples. The legislation allows them to do that. What happens to the samples? Well, my view has always been this, as a criminal lawyer, that once police take your samples, they don't ever get destroyed. They may not ever use it. It's the same with a conviction or non-conviction. If you're acquitted, you say, well, that should be off my record if you have a record. My view is the record, a police record is something that they produce. So you have the information, and here's the record. Now, they may have that information on the record or not, but they'll have the information. So my view is that once information is taken, it's never removed. There is challenges in the European courts about fingerprints, that once you've been acquitted, your fingerprints should be, or fingerprints and DNA should be removed from the record. The law used to be that could happen. At the moment, as it currently stands, the police hold on to your records, whether you're acquitted or not.
Oh, no, Mohammed, I think that's a fantastic idea. And just the way, I'll tell you the way I deal with things is that, and I would say to people, look, when you're traveling, just your name and your flight details, text them to your lawyer. So the lawyer's aware at the time that this time there might be a flight going. And as soon as they stop you, first thing you say is, let me speak to my lawyer, and they will give you a phone call. They will give you a phone call. And when I speak to them, and that's the kind of conversation that Mohammed quite already said, they said, look, you stopped him before, what do you really want? What's the new thing you want? And the other thing to remember is the purpose of Schedule 7, officially, I'll give you the unofficial version, but the official purpose of Schedule 7 is actually to prevent a threat to this flight. So they can't talk about the rest of your life. They say, look, what am I doing here? Where am I going now? Am I taking something with me? Because if you are a dangerous terrorist or a threat, they should arrest you, which enables you to have a lawyer, and you can actually be cautioned and questioned properly. So the real, the unofficial purpose of Schedule 7 is, I recommend the report that the Cage have done. It's called The Cradle to the Grave. And it's just a real, the surveillance society that has been created now, where you keep an eye on people and monitor people at each stage. So if you read the report Cradle to the Grave, it literally starts from the cradle, when your children go to nursery and they want to check there, are you an extremist? Are your parents an extremist? What kind of drawing are you doing? What kind of things are you mentioning? So that's where the surveillance starts. It goes to when you go to the GP, because the doctors are now forced to look out for ways of looking for signs of extremism. I don't know how they're going to do that. But even worse, if you go to optician now, honestly, optician, normally we don't talk to opticians, but they are supposed to work out whether you're an extremist or not. And you can guess how an optician can work out. But that's their obligation.
Maybe the letters on the board.
Maybe the letters on the board, isn't it? Yeah. Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, if you read that, right? But the point is, that's what we're living part of. It's a surveillance society. So Schedule 7 is a green light given to the police is to target and profile every single Muslim.
I just want to make a quick point. Okay. The first thing that Mohammed spoke about was they can only ask you questions about yourself. That comes under the recommendations of how Schedule 7 is meant to be implemented. So they should only ask you questions about yourself, about your journey, and about any terrorism-related activity. The truth of the matter is that they often go outside of that, but that's a breach of their code of conduct, not of the law. They can ask you anything that they want. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I mean, actually, they can ask you about anything. The truth of it is, they can ask you about any supposed criminal activity as well. I think your point about saying, I mean, it's true of any questioning by a police officer. You can answer a question that you have knowledge of, potentially. Yeah. Asking you about other people, I think your answer can be, and it's not giving an answer, it's simply saying, I can't comment on somebody else, actually. That's probably the better way.
That's a good answer.
It's an answer,
yeah.
And it's a better way of dealing with it. I think it's not that sorry, the question was, what if they asked you the names of your family members and the people you live with? I mean, I think invariably they will ask those questions, and I don't know that that's something they can't ask you, but, you know, because obviously you know who your family members are. I don't, for me, the Schedule 7 whole process is a nonsense. And what I really wanted to say, and get back to this point, I think you can talk about lots of little examples, but if we have a more robust approach as individuals and a community, that we say we're not scared of what you're asking us. We're concerned about the situation, anybody would be. But we have to have a certain amount of robustness, and I say that as a lawyer because I'm that kind of lawyer. I'm in the police station, I'm sometimes toe-to-toe. And it is about having the confidence and character to stand up. And as Muslims, we know that that's what's implored of us. I think we need to buy into that, really believe it. I'm not saying be offensive or abusive, although they may be being offensive and abusive to you. You always have to remember your character and have the courage. The real answer is having courage about your situation, rather than fretting, can I answer this or can I not answer that, in terms of this particular issue. The question is, how can I make a complaint about what's happened to me?
IPCC, then I'll talk about
I mean, in terms of
the importance of actually complaining.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that point, the last point, which is the importance of complaining, is the real point. Because what often happens is that people think they're going to complain about the police and the behaviour they've received, and that something is going to be done. Most lawyers take a cynical view, which is that nothing is going to happen. And the truth of it is, invariably, nothing does happen. But and the point that the brother made is, the key point is to make the complaint. You may think, well, nothing's going to happen, but if we don't complain, what the police says, we've not received any complaints.
Exactly. Yeah, brilliant. Listen, the authority for that is actually Brother Asif from Cage. Asif helped to set up the Travel and Wild Muslim, the website at Cage, which deals with all the problems Muslims get when they stop to Schedule 7, etc. But I think generally, brother, your point about complaint, I think is really important. Complain, complain, complain. Don't hesitate to complain. Honestly, let's get their records up. Let's get those documents there. Even though you may feel at the time, actually, it's not very valuable, it's a waste of time, etc., it does have an impact. So do not hesitate to complain.
And to use your solicitor.
Yeah, and if you're unable to complain yourself, use a solicitor. And if you can't get hold of a solicitor, Cage is always there. And I'll pass you to Brother Asif, who deals with the Schedule 7 issues. Sorry,
okay, bismillah. Jazakallah khair. With regards to Schedule 7, I just want to start off. Yeah, the sole purpose of Schedule 7 is to find out if a person is involved in the preparation, commission, instigation of acts of terrorism. So anybody can be stopped, right? Anybody can be stopped at any time, and you can be stopped as many times. You know, so the first thing people ask when they call is, oh, can they do that to me? Yes, they can. What's up? And recently there have been changes in the law. There's been there was a bill that was passed, which is the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Bill, which has introduced some changes. So whereas before it was 9 hours, now they can only hold you for 6 hours. And also there's a bit more structure to a stop, right? I say that because for the last 10 years, people didn't know anything. They were just being stopped. They thought they could never speak to a solicitor. But alhamdulillah, now there's a bit of structure to the stops. And so I'll just quickly go over it. There's 3 phases. The first is a screening phase. When they first stop you, when they ask you, you know, can we speak to you, where you going to, where you're traveling to, this isn't recorded. This isn't recorded anywhere. There's no statistics to show about this. At this stage, you're not officially being stopped under Schedule 7. It's just a question, right? It's what happens after this. Now, potentially a lot of the time, it gets solved at this stage. They ask you questions, you answer back, they said, okay, you're free to go on your way. This is never recorded. There's no statistics, right? This doesn't come under the 60,000 or 70,000 a year stops. So potentially, I reckon even more people are being stopped. It's probably in the hundreds of thousands, to be honest with you. If it goes past that stage, they call it the examination stage, right? So this is usually about 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the questioning, where they'll possibly move you into another room, right? But at this point, they have to tell you, we're questioning you under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act, and they have to give you like a brief explanation that, you know, you have to answer all the questions. Now, at this stage, the official line is that although you have to answer everything, you do not have the right to a solicitor, right? And you do not have a right to contact someone. But the second phase, yes. But I would argue that if you are being detained and they're not letting you go and you have to answer their questions, then you're being detained, right? So this is something that can be, you know, challenged, and I would ask anyone that when you are stopped, immediately ask to talk to your solicitor, and if they say no, please take a note of this, because it can be challenged afterwards, inshallah. But when examined, answer all the questions. Keep your answers quite, you know, focused in terms of what you're doing right now, traveling. And as the solicitors have mentioned, in a kind of controlled way, just try keep it focused. Now, in that first hour, like I said, they can say no, you cannot call a solicitor. No, you cannot call a next of kin. Okay, but when it gets to the hour mark, right? At that stage, the third stage is called detention, right? At that stage, they have to give you a form which you can read and you have to sign, etc., which is basically saying we're detaining you, right? Now, at the detention stage is when you have the right to a solicitor, to call a solicitor, even the public-funded solicitor, right? And you have the right to contact a next of kin. So that's very important. And a lot of people say, well, you know, brother, I didn't want to long it out. I couldn't be bothered calling a solicitor. No, you know what? Call a solicitor. If you can call them at the first instance, do it, right? And then obviously, at this time, there's things like they can take your, as a solicitor, they can take your mobile phone. A lot of the time when they take your mobile phone, they basically plug it into a machine and they will take a snapshot of it, right? And they'll give it back to you, but sometimes they'll hold it for 7 days, etc. They can also search your baggage, etc. They can...
Mention that you can help do complaints, IPC.
Okay. And so from the moment that you're held for examination, maximum 6 hours. Please remember that, okay? Now, KJ are looking at doing workshops, inshallah, so keep a lookout. They're also in the process of creating a Know Your Rights document. What I would say to you is that ensure that you do contact KJ afterwards, okay? Because KJ are logging, and so that, you know, they can collect at least the data. You should go to the IPCC, right? Why? Because at least in there's a statistic there. There's a record of what's happened, right? Now, alhamdulillah, what KG's been doing for the last year is we've been, whenever people contact us, we've been making complaints. We've been asking people to make complaints or helping them make complaints. The Met Police have refused to release the investigations. So what happened was the IPCC launched high court proceedings, a judicial review against the Metropolitan Police, right? So at the moment, there's a big tussle going on. With regards to the Met Police releasing investigation to Schedule 7, right? This is something, alhamdulillah, it's a step in the right direction. Now, with regards to other challenges, I think there's a case in the Supreme Court.
A European court about the liberties doing it.
Yeah, but even in the UK courts, there's a case, and also there's an intervention being launched, inshallah. The Equality Human Rights Commission, they're launching an intervention as well. And in the European court, there is a case which is stayed at the moment because of the things that are happening in the UK.
In regards to social networking websites and what you browse on the internet, can that really be held against you as if you've committed a crime? Is it illegal to browse or share certain things as a tweet or to tweet certain material? If it's all right, can I give a very quick, yeah, just... Basically, anything you tweet or share, it's kind of as if you've said it. So that's the thing that you need to bear in mind here. Most of the time, with these sorts of things, these are used to build up sort of what they'll use in if there was a court case as a mindset. So reading certain things, there's nothing illegal most of the time with the sorts of things that might be implied in that message or in the question, but unless there's actually something directly about how to make an explosive device or something like that, which would obviously be a different matter. But ideological issues like reading fatwas and these sorts of things, generally that's not illegal. But what they could do is use that to say that, look, this person's a radical, and therefore that means that X, Y, and Z should be taken in that context and not in the context of in some other way. The other bits about sharing, there are issues about disseminating terrorist material, which I'll let the solicitors talk to you about.
Just quickly,
yeah, quickly on that point, you may remember there was a case, I'm not sure if it was in this country, I'm pretty sure that it was, or in America, where a PhD student, I think it was an Algerian or Libyan brother. Nottingham, yeah. UK, yeah, exactly. He accessed what they called, I think it was the Al-Qaeda manual, whatever that may be. But where did he get it from? He went to I think it was the CIA website.
Yeah, US military.
US, but I mean, it was something that he was legitimate. It was
available for open download.
Yeah, open download, available to anybody. And they did try and... Right, and he was arrested on that basis. So, but again, it comes down to, I think what we have to think about is how frightened we're going to be, because this is what really concerns me, is that we're, as a community, being frightened into not doing things. Now, if you're downloading the anarchist cookbook, which is how to make bombs and things like that, then obviously you're going to get in trouble. But what we shouldn't have is fear of, let's say, religious texts, and say that we're involved in that on a social network discussing religion, and that somehow that's going to make me look like I'm some kind of radical. And we can't be frightened into doing this. I personally have a big issue with the term, for example, jihadists, because we all know, hang on, we're all jihadists because that's what our religion tells us, but it doesn't mean that. In Western parlance, jihadist means terrorist. Somebody's going to try and kill us. This is where we have to, if we're not robust in these matters, then we give away our language and what it really means, then obviously we're being held hostage to fortune. And so the key, the point that I'm trying to make is that we have to be robust, which means standing up for our rights. That's the way we can best defend ourselves, rather than being fearful all the time. And that's really my message. As a lawyer, if I'm dealing with somebody as a client who's robust about their position, the police also then take a view, this guy knows, she knows what she has a position. We can't push her around or push him around. And that invariably helps that person, if they have a case, in their case. The police may not prosecute them. They'll say, well, actually, we accept what they say. But it is about that. So that's key from my point of view, that we are robust in challenging what's going on.
All right. So the only thing I want to add here is that, just repeat actually what Amar says, that we can't just be cowarded into this where we don't discuss any religion, we don't discuss any politics. We don't, the dissemination of terrorism material is when you have various fatwas or speeches from Al-Qaeda or from Islamic State that's been shared around. That can get you into trouble under the terrorism legislation. But, you know, going to websites like Cage, other Muslim organizations, and I mentioned that because many Muslims actually genuinely are still scared, thinking, well, you can't even go to a certain websites and read their material. That is within the law, and you can quote me on that one. I mean, honestly, there's no problem with that at all. But they want you to be scared, so they want you to think, oh well, you know. And part of the whole thing about when they come around to your neighborhoods with heavy-handedness is to everybody just cower. Yeah. And alhamdulillah, I'm very proud to see that this community hasn't cowered, and that's what Cage will continue to do anywhere in the country. If they need support, and you've seen us, they've targeted us as well, individually, as an organization as well. That's part and parcel of their role. You know what I mean? It's a difficult time for Muslims because obviously we have various big governments who want to target us, right? But we cannot bow our head and go under the bed and start hiding because people have done that. And because we've been campaigning since 9/11, we said to people, look, this is not about terrorism, because ordinary criminal laws are available to stop bombings and killings and all these sort of things, right? But the whole purpose of terrorism legislation and things like prevent policy is actually to scare Muslims into not asserting themselves. And the moment you start asserting your deen, your religion, you've got to ask yourself, well, are you living in the right country? Do you know what I mean, yeah? So it's very important, I think, what I want to finish off with, that we recognize that we can still assert our deen, we can still assert our political values, and be sensible about it, but continue to be engaged with the debate. I'll give it to Kaleem to conclude.
Okay, I think sadly we're out of time for more questions, but on that last question, I just want to say, sort of continue the theme of what was said here by the other two. Look, information is power. It always has been. It's why Cage need the community to come forward and speak to us about what's going on, to inform us of Schedule 7, to inform us of raids, of these sorts of things, so that we have information on them as well, as they're watching us and we're watching them back. And as information is power, we can't be curtailed and we can't be scared to go on the internet and read what people are saying and read what's going on. We have to be a little bit savvy because, let's face it, we live in the real world and we know what's going on. But that doesn't mean go and get under your duvet and put your head under your pillow and hide, because that will only make the problem worse. That will only mean that they'll be emboldened to carry on attacking and taking away our rights. So get out there, read, be aware, be knowledgeable, be outspoken, but just use Cage. And yeah, you use Cage. Look, the whole thing is here. The more information that we've got, the more clearly we can make the case that everybody in this room knows. Everybody in this room has felt Islamophobia in one way or another. Everybody in this room knows what it is to be a Muslim in this country. The non-Muslims don't understand it. There was a recent statistic about America that more people believe in ghosts in America than that racism still exists. That's because the majority of the people that answered that question were white people. Like I say that as a white man myself, but you're just unaware of it. It doesn't come into your daily experience, into your daily life, so you don't know about it. For Cage to be able to speak on behalf of the Muslim community, we need that from you guys to give us the information and the tools and the knowledge to be able to articulate the views of our community. We're not government funded, we're not backed by any big organization, like big sort of like overarching things. We are from the people and of the people. I was raided, I went through these things as well. Cage takes a very, very seriously the fact that we're from the survivor community. We're the people that are going through this, and we're just trying to be a voice for the Muslims in this situation. So inshallah, may Allah put barakah in the work of Cage and everything they do. I'll pass you over to Anas to wrap up, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters, for attending today. Before we finish completely, if you have not signed in, please do sign in. There are some forms at the back just to keep you updated about future events and anything that may interest you. Also, if you do need any personal legal advice, then obviously the lawyers here are here to help. You can get through them via their numbers and their contact numbers on the leaflets that were on the seats. Also, also you can contact Cage prisoners or Cage directly, and they can assist you in any of your concerns, especially things to do with anti-terror and raids, etc. So if you do need to, the resources are there, the people are there to help you, to assist you. Also, HUGS, to not forget, the leaflets were on the chairs, the green one, the green pamphlet. If you do need any assistance, or you know a family that is under stress because of anti-terror legislation, then please do contact HUGS, and they can see to facilitate for them and assist them in emotionally and even financially. So we thank you all for attending again. Inshallah, stay tuned to the Cage website, and there will be, their Twitter, Facebook, social media. There will be future events, inshallah. There will be a coming event soon enough with Brother Muazzam Beg. So possibly that'll draw in a lot of crowds, and he can talk about his personal experience. So inshallah, we'll end it here bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And we thank you all again. And inshallah, we'll be praying Isha here as well before we leave. So jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.